Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Money Pros. I'm Oliver Tutt, certified financial planner, practitioner, and I'll be your host for the next half hour as we talk about all the issues related to your money, how to make it, how to keep it, and hopefully how to help it grow. Let me give you an idea of what we've got in store for today's show. First up, we're going to be talking about a subject that comes up from time to time here on the Money Pros, and that's the cost of raising a child. The government's out with new figures on exactly what they estimate that cost to be, and as always, it's staggering, so I thought I would share it with the audience once again because the new figures just came out. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to be joined by our real estate pro, none other than Chad Kritzas with Keller Realty. We have a special request topic here on the Money Pros, and that is trying to understand the whole appraisal process when it comes to buying, selling, borrowing. So Chad is going to fill us in on that whole thing. Then we're going to be talking about some mental mistakes that people oftentimes make in retirement that are not mistakes when you're actually working. Some of the habits we get into that are a good idea during our working years that no longer are a good idea in our retirement years. We're going to talk about what those are because a lot of people aren't aware of how their thinking needs to shift when that phase shifts for them. So we're going to talk about that. And then finally we have a question from a viewer on a new 401k plan. So we're going to be trying to answer that. So without further ado, let's leap into it. And the first topic, of course, is the cost of raising a child. Now, it's a recurring theme here on the Money Pros. As regular viewers know, I have 4 children, so I am acutely aware of the high cost of raising a child. But many of our viewers have children of their own. They're also aware of how expensive it is. But what's interesting is the government is actually has made a habit of tracking these figures, and many people may come as a surprise to them that it's actually the Department of Agriculture that's been tracking these figures since 1960. They do a survey on the costs of raising a child. Now, why the Department of Agriculture? I don't know if it goes back to when it was important to have a kid working on the farm or something like that. I mean, that's pure speculation on my part, but that is the government agency that does this survey. They've been doing it since 1960, so over 50 years they've actually been tracking these figures. And the new figures for average cost for the year 2015 just came out. So they're always a year behind. So in 2017, they just came out with the 2015 average cost. And it's a pretty detailed survey of what the costs are. And they examine expenses and they cross-reference them by a variety of different data points, including the age of the child, because the costs change as children ages change, the level of household income. They look at the data point of what region of the country you're in, because that can affect obviously the cost of raising a child. And then they look at budgetary components. In other words, what things are people spending their money on. So let's talk about that first. I'm going to throw up a slide really quick, and I want to talk about the 3 categories that actually represent the most expensive. And the first one, the most expensive category for raising a child, is housing. USDA estimates that is 29% of the cost of the child is the housing, whether you need an extra bedroom or you need to pay higher rent to get more space or whatever that may be. Next one up is food, and I can attest to this. They eat like voracious animals, and the food cost is estimated to be about 18% of the cost of raising a child. And then finally, and this is a big one, childcare is obviously a big expense for raising a child. If you have a 2-parent or a single-parent family where both of those people are working and you have to pay additional for childcare, that's substantial. So what are the costs? For a middle-income family in a 2-child married household, the average cost for 2015, or in other words, a child was born in 2015, the parents can expect to pay, on average, $12,980 per year per child. That represents a cost over their lifetime of $284,000 when you factor in anticipated inflation. And I would highlight that that does not include the cost of a college education, which actually could more than double that figure potentially. Some other things that are interesting, other factors, kids in higher income families cost more. Probably not a surprise. If you make more, you spend more on your kids. The urban Northeast, and of course that's where we are, is the most expensive part of the country to raise a child. And finally, each additional child is actually less expensive, and they refer to that fact on the USDA website as the cheaper by the dozen effect. So I guess with 4, I get some kind of bulk discount. I don't know. I haven't seen it in the mail yet, but I'm going to take their word for it. All right, that's it for that segment. Up next, we're going to be talking to our real estate pro, Chad Kritzas, on appraisals. Stay with us. There's more to come. Welcome back to the Money Pros. I'm joined now by our real estate pro, Chad Kritzas with Keller Williams Realty. Chad, thanks for being with us. So special request topics. Somebody involved with the Money Pros, who shall remain nameless, has a lot of questions about the appraisal process. So
yes, he does.
This segment is for that person. So before we get into that, though, we always talk about where the market is at right now. So as this is being taped, we're well into the spring season, I guess. And so let me get an update from you about how things are going. Buyers, sellers, what kind of market is it? Do you see it changing? What can you tell us?
All right, so they just released the first quarter stats as we taped this at the beginning of May. So first quarter stats are out. It's the same issue we've been talking about for the last few segments. Just a complete low inventory situation where there's just not enough houses for sale for the demand that's there. Despite that, and despite inventory being weighed down, we did break all records for the first quarter once again. So single families went up 2% statewide, single family home sales. That number would have been substantially higher if there were more homes for sale. Condos up 21% in the number of sales, and multifamilies with a big gain of over 10% in the first quarter. Now looking at that same statistic, days on market is down 13%. So it all kind of funnels together, right? There's less inventory, more houses selling, they're selling in less time at higher prices, which is kind of what we're talking about today with the appraisals and the higher prices. But the market is probably the busiest market I've seen in 18 years. There's just not enough homes for sale. So the viewers that are considering selling their home, now is the time to do it. We didn't really get the spring influx of inventory that we usually get. So you're going to see a higher value on homes now than you've seen in years.
So it remains a very strong seller's market. One of the things that I'm astounded by, and I think I'm like a lot of people, even though I'm not necessarily in the market, I like to go online, look in my town, see what's for sale. And the number of houses that pop up listed for sale and immediately go under contract.
Immediately.
So it just seems like houses are turning over. The average number of days on the market must be very low right now.
Very low. And a lot of it matters on price range, right? Because you have the big category right now is first-time home buyers, and the other thing they're saying is the downsizing empty nesters. So that kind of, I say lower price point, but that, probably at that under 4 mark, anything under 400,000. And there's even been some houses, and I'm just going to use Newport as an example. There's been a couple houses down in like the 5th Ward, which is Lower Thames Street. I mean, $600,000-$700,000, things I saw them come online, so I thought that's never going to sell. 4 days on the market, 5 days on the market pending, gone. So I mean, it's amazing what's happening.
Sounds a little 2007-esque. I hope that's not the case
coming
from a financial standpoint, but certainly prices are up and properties are moving, which makes this conversation about appraisals such a good one, because this is going to be a key aspect of any of these transactions, right? Particularly, it would seem to me, as prices are shooting up, because the appraisals have to track that. But let's start at the beginning. What is the appraisal when it comes to the real estate transaction? What are we talking about here?
So the appraisal is when you get to the financing portion of a purchase and sale agreement and the buyer's borrowing money, it's kind of an unbiased evaluation of what the home is worth. They're looking at specific things: bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and most importantly, location, because they try and use properties that are within a mile or 2 miles, mattering on if it's urban or suburban, and they're trying to stay kind of close to where the house is. Now, a town like Little Compton may be different, where the houses are more spread out and there's less sales, so they're going to have to get out of that 1 or 2 mile radius. But they're really looking at the features of the home: garage, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and location.
So one of the things I think can get confusing for people is, as we talk about the appraisal process, this is not the process that a seller would go through, like when they say, hey, I think I'm going to put my home on the market, I know a real estate agent, let me contact them, figure out what I can get for my home. That's not the appraisal process we're talking about. We're talking about a professional appraiser.
Correct, a licensed professional appraiser. So when you meet with your agent and you're coming up with the value of your property, that's more of they call it a market analysis. But we use the same random tool. I mean, we're looking at bedrooms, bathrooms,
Same
square
concept,
footage.
sure.
Right, we're not breaking it down on on the level of an appraiser is, minus 5,000 for this, plus 2,500 for this. We're probably not breaking it down on the same scale as the appraisal, but it's the same concept, because what you're really doing is you're looking for the comparable sales nearby.
And so who is the appraiser? Who is the person that provides this professional appraisal?
So it's a licensed, trained appraiser that does this for a living. Now, where times have changed from, say, 2007 or 2008 from the mortgage crisis, was the mortgage broker or the buyer, they can't go pick their appraisal anymore. It goes into an appraisal management company that the bank uses, and they're randomly selected by a pool of approved appraisers. So you can't call your buddy the appraiser to have him come in and make the value work.
Now that's fascinating to me. So that means that it's less likely, certainly, if not impossible, for some cozy relationship to develop between the real estate agent, the lender, and the appraiser to artificially build up the value of the property and overlend on it potentially. So.
Right. Well, and appraisers get in a lot of trouble for that these days. And they don't want to take that risk with us. I mean, is it different if I know the appraiser and we can sit down? And we just had one in Portsmouth where we sat down and went through the comparable sales, and we talked about each one because I had seen each of the houses and the pluses and minuses. Now, I mean, that was fantastic because we could talk about each one as he wasn't from the area.
How much does the appraisal cost? Because this isn't happening for free. Who's paying for it, and what can we expect the cost to be?
It's a buyer expense. A lot of the time, well, it's on the closing statement, so whether or not it's paid in advance or paid out of the closing costs at the end. A typical single-family home probably ranges in about the 500 range. Investment properties, multifamilies, probably 650 or a little higher.
All right, so 500, 650, a little higher, depending on the type of the property. This is an expense that the buyer pays. They could pay it at closing by cash as part of the price of the house, or it could be rolled into the financing or something like that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the time that's determined by them and the banks. So a lot of time you'll see paid outside of closing on the closing statement where they wrote the check when the appraisal was done.
So my next question is, how do you best prepare for the inspection? Now, it's a buyer's expense, so it's the buyer that's paying for it, the buyer that's essentially hiring the appraiser, although they're not the ones directly finding the appraiser. But it's in both parties' interest, the buyer's and the seller's interest, to have the appraisal go well, let's say.
Right.
How does each party in that process prepare to ensure that it's as good a process as possible?
Well, the buyer doesn't really have anything to do with it, because at this point the appraiser is usually calling the listing agent, because we're the ones with the key to get in.
So they might very well never meet the appraiser even.
99 of 100 times probably not.
Okay.
All right. So I mean, we always say you're selling the house twice, right? You're selling it once to the buyer and once to the appraiser, because if you overprice a house and you find a buyer is willing to pay for it, if you can't justify that to the appraiser, they're not getting the loan anyway. So you really have to, you treat it like a showing. You make sure the lights are on, the house is clean, you do what it is. Now, there's two real time frames here. One is, if you're looking down the road and your house isn't even on the market yet and you're preparing for your appraisal, well, really what you're preparing for is showings and a higher value anyway. If your house, and more typically your house is on the market, you're typically through your inspection periods mattering on the time frame. You're treating it like a showing, and you're trying to do as best you can to make the house show well.
So you're going to put your best foot forward as the seller to
Yeah.
make sure that the house appraises well. Now, let's talk about what happens if the value is not what is expected. And I would imagine this can cut both ways. The bigger problem being if it doesn't appraise at the selling price value. What happens then? But also, are there situations where it appraises way over the selling price value, and that creates some kind of turmoil in the closing process? Can you talk about each of those things?
Well, if your house appraises over, that's great, right? Because you're basically walking into instant equity.
But you don't have a seller who says, whoa, wait a minute,
The seller doesn't get the appraisal.
Okay.
The buyer owns the appraisal.
So they're never aware of what the actual appraisal was?
Unless you tell them.
Okay.
But there's really no need to tell anybody, right? Because it's the buyers and the buyer's bank. They've paid for it. They own it.
So that's as long as you keep that number to yourself, there's no obligation to pass that to the seller. That should be a non-issue. Well, let's talk about the other thing. It doesn't appraise up to the agreed upon selling price. What are the consequences there?
So there's a couple scenarios. And now, first off, the first thing that matters is the down payment, right? Because if you're only financing 50% of your purchase price, it's going to have a lesser effect. But let's just say you're doing a 95% financing for the sake of conversation. If the appraisal comes in short, you have a few options. The seller can eat the difference, which in a seller's market is pretty unlikely. There could be a negotiation where both parties agree to split it or each put in a portion, which could be a common solution. You'd also need a buyer that has the cash to make up the difference, right? Because if they're doing a lot of financing, they may not be sitting on the cash money to
So
do
the
that.
lender's not going to say you can't get a loan. They just may very well be saying we're not going to lend you as much as you hoped you were going to get.
Correct. Right? It's a loan value versus the down payment. So, and then the third option, which is less likely, is you can appeal the appraisal, and then the buyer can pay for a new appraiser. But you can't just arbitrarily say, hey, I want a new appraisal, I don't like the value. You have to justify why. Once again, they didn't use a proper comparable sale, there's a house around the corner they didn't include, something like that. You have to be able to justify why you want a new appraisal, not just, I don't like the value.
Is there any opportunity to sit down with the parties, the agents, the appraiser, and say, look, we're close here, but did you consider this or did you consider that? Is there any negotiation, or is this the appraiser submitted his report, that number is carved in stone, and if you don't like it, you're going to have to appeal for another appraisal? You
can appeal it and then send the comparable sales to the mortgage broker that can talk to the appraiser, or however that interconnection works. I can't speak for them, but
it's not a negotiation.
It's not a negotiation, but it's uncommon that it works. I've seen people try all the time. Oh, send me those comps, we'll send them into the appraiser. You know, he left this one out, but I'm not going to say the likelihood of that getting changed is a high percentage.
So last question, this is a critical process, and I would imagine in a market like we're in now, where prices are running up quickly, properties are moving quickly, is there a scenario where the appraisals just don't keep pace with the next sale if prices are moving up as quickly as they are?
Always a concern when the market shoots up like this. I mean, it's once again, they're just looking at what's selling around it, and sometimes it's not even what sold 6 months ago. Now it's what sold 3 months ago, or what sold last week. You know, and sometimes you have to look at pending sales, which they don't look at as often, but you have to see what else is selling around it. So if you have a lack of sales.
So it's not like, you know, this is the point we make about real estate all the time. It's not like going online and looking up a stock price where you can see a transaction that happened milliseconds ago. This is an imperfect science. That's why you need professionals to guide you through it. Absolutely. Hopefully that helps out everybody that's interested in appraisals, but particularly our friend here at the Money Pros who wanted more information. All right, up next, mental mistakes one might make in retirement and how to avoid them. Stay tuned, there's more to come. Welcome back to the Money Pros. One of the interesting things about retirement is in order to get there in a healthy financial situation, you have to develop some good habits during your working years. The interesting thing about that is that some of those habits that we get into, or some of those mental tricks we play on ourselves, I like to call them that in some circumstances, that we get into in our working years become problems in our retirement years. And I run into this a lot because I work with as many people that are trying to get to retirement as I do work with people that are actually in retirement. And to compare and contrast those things, I find to be an interesting process. So there was an article recently in the Wall Street Journal that talked a little bit about this, so I wanted to share some of the points, but also share some of my experiences, some of the trains of thought that I find with people as they go into retirement, and how you have to adjust your thinking a little bit. So as we talk through this, let me put up this slide. We're going to talk about these ideas one by one. And the first one is the idea that savings is an illusion. So what do I mean by that? One of the good habits you have to be in as you work your way to retirement is you have to be in the habit of savings. The fundamental dynamic of being healthy financially, the most basic thing is you have to spend less than you make. And if you are in that type of a balance where you spend less than you make, you will inherently have savings, and that is a critical component because it means deferred consumption, right? You're not spending now so that you'll have that resource later in retirement. That's the most basic idea of getting to retirement in a healthy and sound financial manner. And so you have to have that habit. The problem is sometimes that people carry that habit into retirement, and the reality is that in retirement, where you're no longer working, where you no longer have income from employment, savings becomes an illusion. There is no savings. The only thing that's real is just less spending. So what I see oftentimes is with people that retire, they bring in retirement income and then they mentally think of part of that as savings and they don't spend it. If you're taking money from your savings to live and that's your retirement income and you just don't spend a fraction of it, that savings is really an illusion. It's just less spending. So you have to adjust your train of thought there. Next one on the slide that I want to talk about. The concept of fear of spending the principal. Now, this is an idea that developed when people were less commonly investing in stocks and bonds and more commonly just putting their money in savings accounts and things like that. But the idea of not spending the principal is really a critical financial error, and it's one that in retirement can get you into a situation where you're not bringing in a sufficient retirement income. Now, we don't want you to spend your retirement principal, your retirement savings, while you're working, but when you get into retirement, you've got to be willing to spend that money. And if that money is invested, there are going to be years where you don't make anything on your investment. There are going to be years where you lose money on your investments. But that doesn't mean you don't need income anymore. You can't be afraid to spend the principal. You just have to have a sound strategy for withdrawing the money year over year. Last one I want to put up. The idea of saving the best for last, and I see this as all too common. People that are in very healthy situations when they get to retirement, the reason is because they deferred spending. They said, I'm not going to do this now, I'm going to do this later. Whether it was a new car or improvement on the house or taking a dream trip. Deferring those things is what got you to retirement and made you in a healthy situation. But the reality is once you get to retirement, do those things sooner rather than later. All of our healths will deteriorate at some point in time, and it's more likely that you're going to enjoy many of those things, whether it be a trip or giving gifts to children and grandchildren, what have you, when you're younger rather than older in retirement. So don't kid yourself into thinking it's going to be better later. All right, up next we're going to answer a question about for a viewer on 401ks. Stay with us, there's more to come right here on the Money Pros. Hey, welcome back to the Money Pros. Question from a viewer. This one came to me via email, and it's a common question. We're going to answer it once again here. And the question goes like this. I recently became eligible to participate in the 401k plan where I work. I've never had one before. I know I should probably use it, but I don't know where to start. Well, you start by using it. So don't sweat the decision about where you invest too much. Just set it up so that you get some money taken out of your account every single pay period. That's number one. Number two is try to bump that number up each year. In terms of where to invest, I almost guarantee you, although you don't say, that your 401k has an option for a target date fund. Pick the date fund that most closely corresponds with when you retire, and you will be in very good shape. So great question. Thanks for watching the Money Pros. Please join us again next Sunday, and we'll see you then, folks. Take care. Have a great day.